Hey guys, tonight we wash up on the edge of nowhere. The waves spit you out onto a crescent of sand that glows like bone under a hammering sun. Salt cakes your lips. The surf behind you sloshes with lazy menace, like it knows you're not going anywhere. And in every direction, just the endless blue and a jungle that doesn't wave back. Welcome to the middle of the Pacific Ocean, a sliver of land so remote and forgotten it doesn't even deserve a proper name in your mind yet. It's just the island. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and the time you're tuning in. I always love seeing where these stories find you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink against the heat, staggering into sand that gives like sugar beneath your boots. This place is empty, right? It's got that dreamlike silence, like an abandoned soundstage. A couple of coconut trees lean at casual angles. There's no hum of cities, no planes overhead, not even birdsong, just wind and waves and you. But that's the trick, isn't it? Because this island, this scrap of paradise barely big enough to draw on a map, is about to matter a lot, not because of what it is, but where it is. Strategically perched between major Pacific trade routes, it becomes the hot potato nobody can afford to drop. Historians still argue whether the island's location was genuinely vital or just symbolically irresistible, a box to tick on an admiral's map. But you know one thing, somebody decided it couldn't be ignored. And in wartime, decisions like that come with blood. The year is 1941. The world's already on fire. Europe's been clawing itself to pieces for years now. And Japan, well, Japan has ideas. Big ones. Expansionist. Imperial ones. They're scooping up islands like poker chips, turning them into forward bases and launching pads. This island, it's just another domino to them. But you, standing here, looking out at the surf, can already feel the pull of the future. Soon, it will be far from deserted. Soon, thousands will call it home and then grave. You climb a ridge. The jungle starts to press close, sticky with heat and swarming with invisible bugs. Something about it feels wrong, like the trees are holding their breath, like they're not used to having company. And in a way, they aren't. For centuries, this place was mostly ignored. A few passing ships, some old Pacific Islander legends about spirits who wander here lost and never return. But otherwise, nothing. No one lived here long. Too remote, too dry, too wild. That changed. Of course, because war doesn't care about local lore or logic. It just needs places to put soldiers and launch planes. So this empty island, it becomes a prize. Let's zoom in for a sec. Tactically, Japan wants stepping stones. Midway, Wake, Guadalcanal, the Marshall and Gilbert Islands. You'll hear these names again. They form a net, and our little island sits right in its teeth. But there's also a darker, unspoken reason places like this become battlegrounds. They're disposable. No civilians, no cities. You can flatten them, poison them, burn them to ash, and nobody writes a protest letter. The only ones who suffer are the ones you send in to take or defend them. So that's where we're heading, but not yet. Tonight, you're still on the edge, still safe. Technically, though the mosquitoes are definitely violating the Geneva Convention. You swat at one the size of a marble and wonder how anything so tiny can feel so hostile. Welcome to the Pacific. As the sun dips behind the trees, the colors turn syrupy rich golds and bruised purples spilling across the sky. For a moment, you could forget what's coming. For a moment, the island is just a beautiful, empty place. Then you notice something. A chunk of rusted metal peeks from the brush. You nudge it with your foot. An old anchor chain, not quite. It's too modern. As you clear away vines, you uncover a bent and corroded fuel drum. U.S. military. Maybe you're Japanese, hard to tell. The jungle doesn't care. It eats everything the same. That's when the past starts to speak. See, here's a quirky tidbit most folks don't know. Before the island became a battlefield, it had a moment as a weather outpost. Yep, just a couple of guys with radios and rain gauges, calling in cloud cover and wind patterns. Not glamorous, but crucial for naval operations. And guess what? Those guys were the canaries in the coal mine. When they went quiet one month, no one really noticed. Just another blip in wartime static. But it turns out, silence is never just silence. You head deeper into the trees. Branches claw at your arms. A strange smell clings to the air, sweet but burnt. Old oil decay, you can't quite place it. Then you hear it. Not a voice, not footsteps, just air, breathing wrong, moving differently, like something underneath the earth just sighed. You stop, look around. It's all normal, totally normal. Jungle, bugs, night, except it isn't. The island has started to remember, and it's not a kind memory. There's a low thud in the distance, a rock falling or something else. You'll find out later. But for now, you build a fire. The crackle is warm. The smoke dances up like ghosts looking for exits, and for the briefest moment, the darkness holds back. Still, you know, this place isn't empty. Not anymore. You wake with a start. The fires burn down to embers. The air smells like wet ash and tropical mildew, and something rustles just out of sight, too deliberate for wind, too soft for an animal. But when you squint through the haze, there's nothing there, just vines swaying like they've got secrets. You get up, brush sand off your clothes, and realize something has changed. The jungle's been cleared in places, not by nature, but by human hands. Branches hacked away with machetes, ground tamped down into makeshift paths. You follow one, curiosity leaning hard against your better judgment. What you stumble onto doesn't belong here. Steel beams, concrete foundations, the crumpled skeleton of a radio tower half swallowed by ferns. You've found it, what's left of the island's boomtown phase. See, not long after Japan took control of this territory in the early 1940s, they got busy, fast. They didn't just station a few soldiers and call it a day. No, they transformed this forgotten island into a full-on military hub. Historians still argue whether the Japanese High Command truly saw the island as a linchpin of Pacific defense or simply overcommitted out of pride. But either way, the result was the same. Thousands of troops, engineers, and laborers were dropped onto the island like ants on a sandwich. And suddenly, the jungle wasn't quiet anymore. Imagine the sound. bulldozers growling through palm groves, the clatter of hammers on steel, boots stomping through undergrowth, diesel engines coughing awake every dawn. There were airstrips carved from coral, command bunkers dug into hillsides, and vast fuel depots hidden beneath camouflage nets. You can almost hear it as you walk, the echo of metal on metal. The orders barked in clipped tones. The weird part, none of this ever shows up in tourist brochures, if this island even has any. But during those frantic months, it became a key staging ground for Japan's push across the Pacific. Planes would launch from here. Patrol boats would swing by for refueling. The skies would buzz with reconnaissance craft, their shadows sliding over the waves like watching eyes. And here's your quirky tidbit of the night they even brought gardens. Yep, Japanese military doctrine emphasized self-sufficiency, so soldiers were ordered to plant vegetables. Somewhere beneath your feet right now is the ghost of a sweet potato patch. Makes you rethink jungle survival a bit, doesn't it? But you're not alone out here anymore. As you push deeper through what's left of the airfield half-buried landing lights, a twisted section of runway, you feel it, eyes on your back, the weight of memory pressing in like humidity. This place remembers, and those who built it, they worked with the urgency of people who knew what was coming. Because they did. By late 1942, the Allies had begun striking back. The tide was shifting, and the closer the Americans crept across the Pacific, the more desperate Japan became to reinforce islands like this. Suddenly, it wasn't enough to build airstrips. They started digging in, literally. But we'll save that horror for the next section. For now, you find the remains of a mess hall, at least. That's what you think it was. Long rectangular concrete slab, rusted cooking drums, a few shattered bowls. You imagine the smell of boiled rice and fish, the clang of utensils, the low murmur of tired voices. Not much laughter, though. This wasn't a joyful posting. It was isolation with uniforms. And somewhere nearby, there's a small pile of bones. Don't freak out. They're animal bones, probably. Maybe leftover rations. Maybe a monkey got unlucky. You step around them anyway, because honestly, you don't need that kind of symbolism in your life right now. What you do need is a drink of water. You find a rusted canteen beneath some ferns. Shake it empty. Figures as you sit and rest. A question floats through your mind. Why didn't they just leave? It's a fair one. After all, Japan had far more valuable bases. But pulling out of even a small island like this wasn't just a military decision. It was psychological. Surrendering ground meant admitting vulnerability. And culturally, strategically, that wasn't something the Japanese war machine was built to handle. So instead, they doubled down. They kept flying in supplies, reinforcements, ammunition, concrete, rebar, more lives. You find a weathered sign nailed to a half-collapsed hut. The Japanese characters are faded, but you recognize enough. It reads something like, "Together in effort, united in spirit," or maybe, "Don't complain, keep working." Depends on your translation skills and how sarcastic you're feeling tonight. And here's the emotionally immersive part. You sit on a broken slab of stone, jungle buzzing around you, and try to imagine the mindset of those who built all this. Most were barely older than you. Some didn't believe in the war, Not really, but belief wasn't required, only obedience. You can almost see one of them, a teenage conscript, wiping sweat from his brow, looking across the water and wondering if he'd ever see home again. Maybe he never did. The wind shifts, carries a smell like rust and ocean and something that might be old fuel. It stings your nose. You cough once, then rise. Your path now leads you through a crumbling checkpoint. There's a rusted barrel half melted by time. Faint outlines of tire tracks are still etched into the coral dust. You follow them instinctively, as if they might lead somewhere safer, somewhere where history doesn't sit so heavy on your shoulders. But instead, they lead to the edge of the jungle and a massive mound of disturbed earth. It doesn't belong. Nature doesn't make shapes that neat. It's long, wide, and slightly sunken in the middle. You recognize it for what it is, a collapsed tunnel entrance, the beginning of something darker. You step closer, and just before the wind dies, you swear you hear the faintest click. Maybe it's your imagination. Maybe it's the past reaching forward. But either way, you're not going back the way you came. The click echoes in your skull longer than it should. You freeze, not because you know what it is, but because something deep, prehistoric, ancestral knows. That's not a stick breaking, not a bird call. That's machinery, man-made, precise, and somewhere below your feet, something just moved. You edge away from the sunken mound, heart doing its best tap dance routine. You've reached the part of the island where nature gives up and the island's second, secret life begins. The one that doesn't show up on maps. The one made not of palm trees and coconuts, but steel, sweat, and fear. You remember the way the Japanese military transformed the surface of this place. But what they did underneath is far stranger. This wasn't just construction, it was vanishing. They didn't just prepare to defend the island, they prepared to disappear into it, digging into volcanic rock with only hand tools and rudimentary explosives. They created one of the most complex tunnel networks in the Pacific. These weren't simple bunkers, they were underground cities, barracks, ammunition depots, medical stations, command posts, miles of labyrinthine passageways, some with false walls, booby traps, and tunnel forks designed to confuse invaders. Historians still argue whether these networks were tactically brilliant or strategically doomed from the start. On paper, they made sense: use the terrain, protect soldiers, frustrate attackers. In practice, well, you'll see. Right now, you've found one of the access shafts, a rectangular hole, reinforced with rusted rebar and old wood. You peer down. It yawns like a throat, black, bottomless, whispering your name with all the charm of a haunted elevator shaft. You shouldn't go in, you're going in. The air shifts the moment you drop in. Cooler, still. It smells like rust, mildew, and time. Your feet land on soft, packed soil. Your eyes adjust slowly to the dark. No light sources here. Only the faintest shaft of sun filtering through moss-choked slats above. You flick on a flashlight. The beam carves a narrow tunnel in front of you. Walls damp with condensation. Carved tool marks still visible in places. You run your fingers across them. It's rough, jagged, human, and then you hear it again, the silence. But it's different here. On the surface, the silence was natural wind, bugs, waves. Down here, it's held, like the tunnels are still waiting for orders, like the men who dug them never really left. You pass an old medical room, a stretch of wooden planks for a bed, empty morphine vials scattered like forgotten dice. There's a faded red cross painted on the wall, and next to it, something in chalk kanji for sleep without pain. You pause. That's probably the most poetic thing you've ever read in a war zone. Further in, you find ventilation shafts, communications wires still half hanging from the ceiling, and a crude intercom made from scavenged radio parts. You wonder how many voices once passed through it. Orders, please, final messages never heard. Here's a fun little fringe tidbit. Some tunnel segments were said to be cursed. Superstitious soldiers swore they'd feel cold winds where none should blow, or see shadows crawl the wrong way across the walls. One rumor claimed a passage collapsed not from explosives, but because the spirits inside got tired of being disturbed. Hard to confirm, of course, but down here, flashlight flickering, breath fogging slightly in the chilled air. You could almost believe it. Emotion creeps in like a draft. Imagine being one of those soldiers, assigned to this island, digging for weeks, sleeping underground, eating salted fish and boiled weeds, waiting for an enemy you might never see, and knowing, deep down, that the best case scenario was death in battle, the worst starvation in the dark. You pass an old latrine area, smells surprisingly fine now, but your imagination fills in the blanks. Then there's the radio room. Your beam catches a desk covered in mildew and decayed paper. You pick one up. Most of the writing is illegible, but one line stands out in shaky pencil. The light doesn't reach us anymore. You step back. The deeper you go, the less the tunnel feels like something built by men. It starts to feel organic, twisting, uneven, alive. You lose count of the turns. You double back, unsure. The place starts to blur. Is that left turn new? Was that rust patch there before? And then music, faint, not real, but something like music, 4 descending notes, over and over, just quiet enough to doubt. Your brain tries to place it, but can't. It's not from your world. It's the kind of tune dreams hum when they turn on you. You break into a wider chamber. Your light sweeps across a long, open area. This was a storage bay once. Dozens of crates, ammunition, preserved food, medical gear. Most have rotted away. A few remain sealed. You crack one. Inside rice, or what used to be rice. Now it's more of a moss habitat. You laugh quietly, because what else can you do? A scuttling noise answers you. Sharp, close. You whip around. Light dances. Nothing. Just shadows hugging walls. But now you're moving faster. You retrace your steps, back past the infirmary, back past the writing on the wall. And just as you reach the entry shaft again, your flashlight dies. Dead. No warning. Just gone. Silence folds in like a curtain. You close your eyes. Take a breath. Fumble for the ladder. Climb. When you break into daylight again, it feels like emerging from underwater. The sun is blinding. The air too hot. But you are out. You made it. Whatever waited down there didn't follow. At least, not yet. You sit beneath a tree, skin slick with sweat, heart thudding against your ribs like it's trying to escape. And you realize something. The men who built those tunnels weren't just hiding. They were preparing. For you, you lie back in the grass, staring up through a break in the canopy. The sky is a slow swirl of cloud and sea breeze. And for a second, you think you hear birds again, but your ears are playing tricks on you. Every sound feels suspect now. Everything too quiet, too rehearsed, like the island's putting on a show. There's something weirdly theatrical about this place, isn't there? You've already walked through a war zone disguised as paradise. Now you're starting to sense the shift from construction to desperation, because once the Americans began island hopping closer and closer, Japan had a choice: evacuate or entrench. Guess which one they picked? This is where the story tightens. It's 1944 now. You're a Japanese soldier stationed here. The sun still shines. The sea is still blue, but the command radio has gone silent. No more supply ships, no new orders. Just a single message that plays once every few days. Hold the island. Reinforcements are coming. Spoiler alert, they aren't. So what do? You dig deeper, ration harder, wait longer. You walk to the edge of the western bluff now, toes sinking into sun-bleached sand. Below, the sea looks calm, maybe even kind. But it wasn't that way in the spring of '44. That's when the first American destroyers showed up offshore, dropping shells into the jungle like punctuation marks in a very angry letter. And the Japanese defenders, they didn't meet them on the beaches. They let them land, because now, the tunnels you explored, those were their real weapons. The strategy had shifted to something brutal and honestly, kind of terrifying attrition warfare. The plan: make the enemy fight for every inch. Draw them in, exhaust them, make them bleed for ground. Here's your historical anchor for the night. This strategy wasn't unique. It mirrored tactics used during the Battle of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, infamous names in WWII lore. Japanese commanders knew they couldn't win outright, but they could slow the American advance, buy time, and maybe, just maybe, force a negotiation. But down at the ground level, literally in the mud and blood, that plan translated into one thing: survival hell. You walk past what used to be a lookout post, just a few bricks now, and a steel helmet split open like a melon rind. The sun glints off it like a wink from the past. You feel it again, that chill under your ribs, that pressure on your neck, like the island's leaning in to whisper, you're not done yet. So you push inland, through a zone that once buzzed with gunfire and the whine of aircraft overhead. It's oddly beautiful now. Vines curling around broken artillery, butterflies flitting over foxholes, nature reclaiming metal, bone, and memory in one slow breath. But you're walking on a graveyard, and not just metaphorically. Here's your quirky tidbit toward the end. Japanese troops were so cut off, they began crafting grenades from bamboo and blasting caps. Their uniforms were patched with bark fiber. One record mentions soldiers boiling boot leather into soup because even that was food. Think about that next time your stomach grumbles before dinner. You find a carved wooden post, faded writing etched into the grain: to live is shame, to die is duty. Heavy. Huh. The phrase was common among imperial troops, especially as defeat loomed. But here's where it gets messy. Historians still argue whether those sentiments were sincerely held or brutally enforced. Some soldiers chose death. Others were cornered into it by commanders who equated surrender with dishonor. You pause to feel that weight. Imagine being 19, half-starved, jungle fever, eating your joints, your friends gone, and the last thing your superior says is, charge them, die well. Emotion hits different here. especially when you find the battlefield. It's just up ahead, a long, sloped clearing lined with craters, melted helmets, and the broken husks of weapons. You stand at one end, eyes following the trail of destruction up to a ridge where a concrete machine gun nest still sits, silent and rusting. It's beautiful in a horrible way. Sunlight filters through the smoke trees. Moss blankets the corpses of rifles. There's a haunting serenity to it all, like the war sighed and laid down for a nap it never woke from. You wander slowly, each step sinking into loamy soil. At one point, your boot kicks something hard metal. You crouch. It's a bayonet, still sharp. You pick it up, feel the weight, and gently put it back. No souvenir is worth that kind of history. This is the moment, the emotional beat. You close your eyes and listen not with your ears, but your imagination, and suddenly, it's all there, the roar of engines, the scream of shells, the shouts in two languages, and the sound no one talks about, the silence after, the heavy, awful nothing that follows a firefight, when you're not sure who lived, who didn't, or if the enemy's still watching. And then, at the far edge of the battlefield, you see it, a cave, blacker than the tunnels, lower, deeper, no obvious entrance, just a vertical slit in the rock, like the earth trying to keep a secret. You edge closer. A rusted sign hangs above the mouth. The writing is almost gone, but you can make out three characters, Ben Boo How, Command Bunker. You stare into it. The air that escapes is cool and smells like copper and earth. This was it, the final fallback, where the last officers hunkered down, radios dead, maps meaningless, planning counterattacks that would never happen. It's not just a bunker, it's the end of the story, or at least their story, but not yours. You reach for your flashlight, flick it back on, and prepare to enter. One step, then two. The light catches on something just inside the doorway. A boot, still upright, still laced, as if the person who wore it just vanished. You take a breath so deep it feels like it might wake the island. Your hand brushes the doorway of the command bunker. Stone, damp and slick, almost like skin. You half expect it to flinch. It doesn't, but you do. When the flashlight flickers again, briefly dipping the cave into darkness, you press on. Inside, the air is thicker. Still, it's like walking into a held breath. The ceiling is low, forcing you to crouch as you shuffle forward. Dust swirls through the beam of your light, particles suspended in time, like they've been waiting for someone to come back. Someone like you. The corridor curves slightly, and your boots crunch on griddle dirt, rust flakes, bone. You try not to think about that one. The tunnel opens into a larger chamber, the floor uneven with half-collapsed crates and what might once have been chairs, now just twisted metal skeletons. You're standing in what remains of the Japanese command center. This is where decisions were made desperate, sleepless, sweat-slicked decisions. You scan the room, picking up the pieces. There's a war table with a rotted topographical map still pinned down. You trace the coastlines with your finger, matching it to the island outside. Someone once fought to control every ridge and gully you walked past earlier. In the far corner, a half-burnt logbook lies open. Most of the ink has bled into gray blurs, but a few entries survive. One reads, We are shadows. No water, half rations. Morale unbroken. Will not surrender. A single dot of ink trails off at the end, like the pen shook as it wrote. You try not to imagine the writer's hands. Here's your mainstream history moment. Japanese command bunkers like this were common throughout the Pacific Campaign, and they often became the final strongholds in battles. Officers and soldiers alike would hole up in them during final assaults. On some islands, they held out for weeks, even months after the fighting above ground had ended. But here's the fringe twist. Some reports suggest that, on this island, a few officers refused to acknowledge the war had ended. Long after Japan's surrender in 1945, leaflets were dropped, loudspeakers used, even family members brought in to coax out the holdouts. But certain men never emerged. One myth claims that when U.S. forces finally breached this command bunker, they found a small group of men sitting upright, silent, rifles on their knees, dead for weeks. Another story, less grim but no less eerie, says the last man to leave this cave did so 10 years later, thinking it was still 1945. Historians still argue whether these legends are exaggeration or evidence of just how deeply ideology had rooted itself. Was it blind loyalty brainwashing, or just the inability to accept that the world had moved on without them? You lean against the wall, suddenly aware of how silent it is again. No birds, no bugs, no wind, just the buzz of your own nervous system, reminding you that you're still alive. You think back to that soldier's note. We are shadows. Yeah, that feels about right. You sweep the room once more. Near the back wall, something catches your light, an old photograph, curled and yellowed, tucked into a crack in the stone. You pull it free gently. It shows a group of young men in uniform, arms slung around each other, grinning, probably early in their deployment. Before the isolation, before the starvation, before the world above forgot them. One of them, the man on the end, looks directly at the camera, eyes sharp, chin lifted, like he knows he won't be coming home, but wants you to remember he was here. Emotion again. It sneaks up on you. There's something about faces from the past, how they lock eyes across time, reminding you that history isn't just events and strategies. It's people, scared, brave, hungry, laughing, dying. You return the photo to its crevice, and that's when you hear it. A faint sound like paper shifting, or cloth dragging across stone. You spin, light darting across the room. Nothing moves, but something feels different. You step slowly back toward the corridor. The bunker isn't just dark now, it's aware. You swear the walls are holding their breath. You move faster, through the narrow hall, past the boot, still standing like a forgotten exclamation mark, out into the choking brightness of afternoon. You stagger away from the cave mouth. Your eyes sting, your lungs ache for open air. But you don't stop until you've reached the tree line again, where the birds have finally decided to start singing again, probably just to mock you. You plop down on a rock and grab your canteen, but the water tastes stale. Or maybe you do. So here's the deal. You've now seen every layer of this island, the peaceful surface, the militarized shell, the haunted tunnels, and the dying breath of the command corps. All of it engineered not for survival, but for sacrifice, a monument to a strategy that turned men into ghosts. And yet, it's not over, because as much as the war has ended, this island isn't done with you. There's one more trail, a narrow footpath at the southern edge that disappears into dense overgrowth. No one talks about what's down there. No signs point the way. But you notice the footprints, fresh. Someone else has walked that path recently, and if they went down it, they might still be here. You follow the footprints. They press deep into the loam. Not old enough to be wartime, no. These are modern shoes, not boots. Wide treads, probably hiking gear. You wonder who they belong to. Another explorer, a researcher, or someone who came here for the same reason you did chasing ghosts in the jungle. The path is narrower here. Vines curl around your ankles. Thorns nip at your sleeves. The jungle presses in, tighter, more possessive, like it doesn't want to let you go. You duck beneath low branches, your flashlight dangling at your side. More comfort than tool now. The air shifts. Not the cool dampness of the cave or the salty breeze from the coast. This is heavier, sweeter, almost rotten. You wrinkle your nose. Something's decomposing nearby plant, animal, maybe worse, but you keep walking. You pass rusted wire strung between two trees barbed. Ancient, a forgotten perimeter? Past that. The trail opens slightly, and you stumble into a small clearing, almost perfectly circular, framed by palms. At the center stands a shack. No, was a shack. It's barely holding together now. A few wooden slats, a metal roof bent inwards like it tried to escape into the ground. Moss climbs its sides like mold on bread. The footprints stop at the door, and inside is silence. You step in, it's dim, but your eyes adjust. The room is cluttered, and your brain takes a second to decode what you're seeing. A cot, a wooden desk, a cracked teapot, pinned up newspaper clippings, yellowed into papery fossils, and in the corner, a suitcase with a Japanese flag sewn to the side. You exhale slowly. Someone lived here, long after the war. And here's your mainstream historical fact. A number of Japanese soldiers, called holdouts, remained on Pacific Islands for years, even decades, after WWII officially ended. Some were never informed of the surrender. Others simply refused to believe it. Hiru Onoda, probably the most famous, held out on Lubang Island in the Philippines until 1974. That's almost 30 years of jungle survival, still in uniform, still on mission. But here's the fringe whisper this island may have had one of its own. Not as famous, not documented with parades and interviews, just missing. A ghost in a ruined shack. No name, no record, no retrieval. There are whispers of locals who found signs of someone living out here well into the 1960s. Small fires, dead fish strung up like offerings, strange figures glimpsed through trees, gone by the time anyone blinked. Historians still argue whether this was a true holdout or something else entirely. A drifter, a deserter, or, as one speculative theory goes, a man who knew the war had ended but chose never to return, who preferred the company of silence and shadows over the world that moved on without him. You touch the desk. Dust leaps into the air. There are scratch marks Japanese characters carved into the wood, repeating over and over Jongchung Chusei. Loyalty. To what, to whom? You find a cloth bundle tucked beneath the bed frame. Carefully, you unwrap it. Inside is a faded photo, different from the others. A woman and child standing in front of a house, smiling, alive. The man who lived here must have carried them in his mind long after their faces disappeared from the real world. Emotion stirs again. This isn't just a story about tactics or tunnels. It's about what gets left behind, lives paused, rewound, erased. People who vanished not in explosions, but in silence. And silence wraps around you now like a thick blanket, until you hear it, a voice, not words, more like a murmur, low and broken, like someone talking in their sleep. You spin toward the door. Nothing, but you feel it, that pressure again, the sense that you're not alone in the room, that someone else has stood in this exact spot, very recently. Then you see it, a cup on the desk empty, but still wet at the bottom. You check your pulse, pissed. Too fast. You step back outside. The sky is dimming, late afternoon, bleeding into dusk. You should go. You want to go, but the trail continues past the shack, down a slope that winds toward the cliffs on the island's southern edge, a place that, according to your map, shouldn't even be accessible. Too rocky, too remote, too dangerous. But of course, that's exactly where you're going next, because this is where the island's most enduring mystery lies. Not in the bunkers, or the battlefields, or the command post, but in the one area nobody mapped, the place with no name. You descend the slope. The terrain shifts under your feet. Sand gives way to jagged rock. The trees thin. You start hearing the sea again, but louder now, like it's angry you came back. Waves slam into cliffs below. The light fades fast here, shadows stretching longer than your footsteps. Then you see it, a cave entrance much larger than the command posts, yawning open in the cliffside like a wound. Something tells you this is it, not just the end of the trail, the end. You duck inside, flashlight back on, heart thudding. The tunnel here is different, wider, man-made, but not military, carved for a purpose older than war. Symbols on the wall, charcoal markings, bones, animal. Hopefully, you step deeper, and that's when your beam catches something unexpected. A shrine, a tiny altar, nestled into the rock, a small bowl of rice, a candle, and behind it, an old, crumbling photo of a young man in uniform, same face as the one from the shack. He's staring right at you, still loyal, still here. You kneel, instinctively, not sure why. You don't believe in ghosts, not really, but you say something anyway. A word, a whisper, thank you, and in that moment, the wind shifts, a breeze curls through the tunnel, soft and warm, brushing your face like a hand, and you swear just for a second that you hear someone exhale, then silence. Again, you stand slowly, flashlight trembling in your hand, and behind you, in the cave's mouth, a shape flickers past the entrance. Not a soldier, not a shadow, but someone watching, still loyal, still here. You don't chase the shadow. You've learned better by now. Instead, you back away slowly from the shrine, careful not to disturb the bowl, the candle, or the photo still gazing out at you with unnerving calm. You whisper a soft apology, though for what exactly you're not sure. For trespassing, maybe, for witnessing, for leaving, when they never did. The wind dies as you exit the cave, as if the island itself is holding its breath again. You're drenched in sweat, limbs shaky, adrenaline half spent, but still leaking through your system. The sky has fully dimmed now, moving toward night. You haven't eaten since morning, but you're not hungry. Not anymore. Backtracking the trail feels harder now. The way uphill seems longer, more reluctant. The jungle noises pick up again. Birds, insects, branches groaning softly in the breeze. The island feels less dead, but not alive either. Something in between. You reach the clearing where the shack stood, and now, in the gathering twilight, it looks almost gone, like it's folded further into itself, vanishing molecule by molecule. You don't go inside again. You just nod once toward it, then continue north, retracing your steps toward the old airstrip. You have one more place to visit. And yeah, it's exactly what you think, the rusted skeleton of a downed warplane. You've seen it from the cliffs earlier, half hidden by overgrowth. The trail there is barely more than a suggestion, a mix of erosion and foot traffic worn by curious wanderers like yourself. The trees part after 20 minutes, and there it is, the wreck, an old Mitsubishi A6M0, nose first in the dirt, its wings bent back like a broken insect. One propeller blade is gone. The cockpit glass is shattered. Time has not been kind, and yet it's beautiful. The plane is mottled with moss, its sides tattooed with vines, like nature has been carefully, lovingly claiming it piece by piece. You step closer and run your hand along the hull. It's still warm from the day's sun. The metal hums faintly under your palm, resonant, like a memory. This isn't just any wreck. It's the island's last flight. And here's your historical anchor near the end of the war. Japanese pilots were often given impossible orders, fly missions with no fuel to return, no backup, no chance. Some were kamikaze attacks. Others were reconnaissance or supply drops for stranded garrisons. Many never made it back. Their planes went down in jungles, over reefs, on cliffsides, silent tombs scattered across the Pacific. This Zero was likely on such a mission. The lack of blast damage, the angle of descent, it wasn't shot down. It ran out of sky. Inside the cockpit, you find something that stops your breath. A flight log, miraculously dry, folded under the collapsed seat. You tug it free with trembling fingers, careful not to tear it. The writing is faint but legible. Names, dates, and short clipped notes like visibility poor, south wind, no contact with base, rations low, morale fair. If this is my final flight, you stop there because the ink smudges, or maybe your eyes do. You fold it carefully, like it's a living thing, and place it back where you found it. And now comes the quirky twist, one that feels too poetic to be true, but it's real. In the 1980s, a tourist found a locket buried in the mud under this very plane. Inside was a tiny photo of a woman holding a parasol, smiling serenely. On the back, scratched in minute kanji, were the words "Dai Tsuteru," I'm waiting. Some say the pilot placed it there before takeoff, like a promise. Others claim the woman never stopped standing at the dock in her home village. Long after the war, no official record was ever found, but locals started calling this plane the waiting bird. Historians still debate the story. Was the locket real, Did it belong to this pilot, or was it someone else's? Hidden later as a tribute doesn't really matter. The story stuck, and when you hear it now, standing in the hush of dusk beside this wreckage, you feel the waiting, not just hers, everyone's. The island is full of waiters, officers, soldiers, holdouts, pilots, all paused in time, gripping orders that were never rescinded, holding onto loyalty that no longer had a country, hoping, maybe, that someone would come and remember. You came. You kneel in the grass beside the zero and stare at the horizon, where the sea glows purple under the fading light. The stars begin to appear, quiet and uncaring. You feel very, very small. And that's the emotional thread now, not fear or awe, but deep, echoing loneliness. Not yours, theirs. What must it have felt like to wait on this island withering rations? No word from home, watching your friends die one by one, knowing your story would likely end in a cave, a cockpit, or a shallow grave under vines. And still holding on, still loyal, you stand slowly, legs stiff, the last edge of sunlight catching the rusted fuselage. The jungle begins to reclaim it again, minute by minute. You start walking back, your mind quiet, and then, in the half-light, you spot something, a footprint, fresh, not yours. You kneel. It's the same tread as before the hiker, the unknown wanderer. But now there's another one beside it, narrower, barefoot. You follow them a few paces until they vanish into undergrowth. And you stop, because maybe you've seen enough. Maybe the island wants to keep some secrets. Still loyal, still here, you hike back to the airstrip under a sky full of stars. No artificial light touches this place now. No electricity. No cities in sight, so the night blooms wide above you. A dense scatter of constellations humming against a velvet black canvas. You catch Orion's belt, low near the horizon, and Cassiopeia lounging sideways above the trees. The Milky Way cuts straight through, a milky smear like candle smoke drifting across the heavens. It's stunning, and somehow it feels like the island itself is sighing tired. Maybe, but finally less hostile. You reach the cracked airstrip and sit on the edge of the old tarmac. Crickets sing around you. The wind has shifted again, softer now, and for the first time all day, the island feels less like a death trap and more like a place in mourning. You stretch out on your back, let your heartbeat settle, let the ghosts exhale. So many questions linger. Why did they stay? Why didn't anyone come? Did the men hiding in these forests really believe the war raged on? Or was it pride, shame, fear, something too tangled to explain in words? Historians still argue whether loyalty or trauma was the deeper engine. Some say it was fear of returning to disgrace. Others argue these soldiers were so indoctrinated, so isolated, they simply couldn't comprehend a world where Japan had surrendered. One haunting theory even suggests that a few didn't want the war to end. That for them, the battlefield became identity. The jungle became home. And now you've walked those same paths, sat in their shacks, felt the strange emptiness of tunnels where orders once echoed. You've met the island, not the tourist brochure version, not the historical bullet points, the real one, the aching, haunted, strangely beautiful truth. And here's one last quirky detail before we let the island sleep in the early 2000s. A retired WWII historian came here and left behind a small offering of his own, a paper crane, folded by his granddaughter, placed gently on the airstrip, held down by a single smooth stone when he returned a year later. It was gone, but in its place, someone had drawn a circle in the dust with 5 lines radiating from the center, a symbol no one knows what it means, but the man said, when he saw it, he didn't feel afraid. He felt acknowledged, like the island had seen him too. You roll onto your side now and trace shapes in the dust with one finger. Maybe you leave something small behind yourself, a mark, a thought, a quiet thank you. Then you stand, one last glance toward the tree line, where the jungle rustles with secrets, where the cliffs loom in shadow, where that pilot's zero rusts in reverent stillness. And with that, you begin your walk back to the boat. Your steps feel slower now, not from fatigue, though you're definitely that, but from something softer, a kind of respect, a kind of reverence. The island isn't a death trap anymore, not to you. It's a monument to all the things that outlast war, the silence of forgotten names, the rusting patience of a plane that never took off again, the photograph of a family that never stopped waiting, the whisper of a man still loyal to a flag, no longer flying. And as the dock comes into view and your boat rocks gently in the tide, you pause one last time and look back. The jungle is utterly still, and somehow, you know, the island is watching, still loyal, still here. You made it. And now, as you settle into your bed, maybe with your blanket tucked just under your chin and the hum of a nearby fan mimicking that distant jungle breeze, let your breathing slow down. Let the weight of tonight's story rest gently across your shoulders, not heavy, not dark, but thoughtful, like the hush after a long journey. The island you explored wasn't just a place, it was a memory, a time capsule of war and peace, survival and silence, of men who disappeared into the foliage, not in anger, but in duty, and maybe, in some strange way, in devotion. As you close your eyes, picture that trail again, the broken runway beneath your feet, the plane asleep under vines, the tunnel carved into stone, echoing only your heartbeat, and above it all, that sky, that ocean of stars, unblinking and wide and ancient. You don't have to solve the mysteries tonight, or ever. Some stories are meant to remain a little unfinished, but know this, you went somewhere few ever do, not just into history, but into the quiet spaces between the facts, the places where emotions live, where loyalty lingers, where time pauses, just for a while. You honored that space, and it honored you back. So now, let your thoughts fade gently, like waves smoothing over sand. Let the jungle grow quiet in your mind. Let the shadows fold back into the trees, and let that last whisper echo once more. Still loyal, still here, the story is over. See you tomorrow night. Sweet dreams.